beautiful souls. So today I'm just going to share a little extra and just relation to, all the stuff that I've been doing and researching in the masculine and feminine. It's been a journey for me over the last year to really dive deep into this, because this is that next level of understanding lots of parts of our lives, because relationships, our principal areas like being the mother or a father or our jobs, all these things relate to our masculine and feminine, right? And so I wanted to share some of the things that I've discovered, okay? I have written it all down because I could talk and maybe share lots of stuff, and I'm very in my feminine today, as you can see, and I could end up all over the place. So I want to say a little bit directed and a little bit in the masculine, right? And share a little bit structured as well, so that you guys get as much as you can from what I'm going to share today. Now, firstly, I want to share that this is what I have resonated with. There is so much that I have read and discovered through some of the programs I have done recently. Also, I have read lots of books like The Intimate Communion and the Queen's Codes, and I've done like Beyond Polarity, and there's been so much that I've looked at, right? And it has been a discovery of myself again, another level of myself, and we're continually evolving. So the more we can master every part of ourselves, the better that we will be in life, right? In our relationships, our work, whatever it is, our principal areas. So today is about the masculine and feminine, the polarities, the light and the dark. So within everybody, me being female, I contain masculine and feminine energies within me. Okay, and this runs in light and dark. All right, and they polarize. So usually the masculine and feminine polarize each other. So light and dark. Okay, so if it was light masculine, it could be dark feminine, right? And I've actually seen this coming out and playing out in my life. And as I've learned, we also have the healthy quadrant. So there's 4 parts, because we got the feminine, light and dark, masculine, light and dark. So there's 4 quadrants. And we can also be in the unhealthy parts of those, right? So that may even be shadows. But I will go a little bit into the archetypes, how they play a little bit in this stuff as well. And it's just, like I said, a self-discovery of yourself. So this is what resonates with me. You take what resonates with you and allow this to sink in and be open to it, okay? And there's a lot to share in this. So I won't cover everything, but as much as I thought will be important, right? So, I've already explained that we've got 4 quadrants, light, dark, masculine, feminine. Okay, so most people think that the dark part is our shadows, the bad, right? But that's actually not true. So light refers to the top chakras, top 3, and dark refers to the bottom 3 chakras. Now, I have covered a bit about the chakras in this, okay? So, and of course, divine unity comes into the heart, where everything becomes whole of the masculine, the feminine, the light, and the dark, okay? So understanding that dark does not mean negative, bad, or anything like that. It refers to the lower chakras, the bottom 3, which is a base, base of sacral and a solar, and light comes from our throat, third eye, and crown, okay? And then divine unity is the heart. All right, so needed to clear that up. It's very important that we understand that component to it. And of course, then when we're looking at the dark, we're looking at those bottom 3 chakras and how they relate in the feminine and the masculine, okay? And there's principal things that do relate to just feminine or just masculine, but there's also areas or parts that we could say blend that can be in both, okay? So, hang on, my page is not moving, so I don't know if it's going to, just a sec. Must be clicked off my thing. Here it is. All right, yay, we're moving. Okay. So the next thing that I bring into this is that commonly we talk about the light is like Father Sky, universe. We're drawing in that light energy, and that's masculine, okay? So that's a consciousness. And the feminine is Mother Earth. So when we, ground our energy and we connect into that and drawing that energy up for healing. So sometimes we draw both ways, and that creates a unity within our body, right? So we need to have both, and we need to have all our chakras open and balanced. And sometimes our chakras can be out of balance, right? And this can also affect our light and dark. Okay, so understanding why it's important to have our chakras in balance, but also the light and dark, masculine, feminines, okay? that the archetypes do play in different quadrants. So, for example, I'm not going to go lots into the archetypes, but for an instance, a lot of the time the feminine, light feminine, sorry, is the maiden, the mother, right? She's the nurturer. She takes care of the children. You know, she's that caring component, yeah? And for an example is a warrior would likely be the dark masculine. You know, he's the protector and he's strong and he's fierce and he's service providing, right? So, you know, we have those. And then there's the shadow archetypes, which are usually pulling out outside of those spaces as well, right? Usually something to do with like the sensual archetypes, you know, like the really, like say the female and she's in that real sensual goddess type archetype. Not all, because goddesses can range in love and things like that too, but if it's sexual based, you know, she's likely to be in the dark feminine, okay? And that doesn't mean it's unhealthy either, right? Because we need to contain and own our sexuality. We need to own our sensuality, right? So it's understanding those components that they can polarize, but they can also be a blend, okay? So, you know, your Aphrodite might be more around the heart space, right? So she's a blend, right? And the queen is integrating all of those, you know? So it can be just one, but it can also be all of the quadrants, okay? So that's another big part for it. Now the next one is talking about that there is the healthy and the unhealthy, okay? So I'm going to go into what unhealthy and healthy can be in parts of that. Again, I'm not going into huge amounts of depth in this, and I will post some stuff. Where we've lost that click again, and I'm not moving, and I don't like it. Oh, I don't like it. What's going on? No, just joking. Stuck inside, right? It's been raining for days and days here. And I just wanted to get in and share something extra with you guys, right? As I do, sharing the love, helping you guys out. And my page is not working, so you'll just have to bear with me. And so, relationships, yes. So, we polarize in our relationships, okay? And I'm just going to put this down. So, commonly in like a sexual relationship or our lovers, we polarize. So, for an example, in my marriage, I was definitely much more in my light feminine and partly in my unhealthy light feminine as well. I was the mother and the nurturer, and, you know, I stayed at home and, you know, was basically that giving that care around the household, right? And nurturing these beautiful little children. But I also, to be in a healthy feminine, light feminine, we need to have part of our dark masculine integrated. And dark masculine was there in my business and things like that. And I held boundaries around certain things. But with my ex-husband, the boundaries were not there and they were pushed a lot, right? And so that means he was in an unhealthy like dark masculine because he would push my boundaries, but also that I wasn't standing strong and owning my boundaries and owning my integrity to allow me to be completely in that light feminine. So I was like a doormat. I was, you know, stepped on a lot. I was not appreciated for the role that I was playing as well. So the interesting thing is once I got divorced or separated and moved into my own house, I flipped into the dark masculine. I became the provider, the safety, the security for the household, right? I needed to step up to that mark. And so I was still doing some of that nurturing. And what happened here was it started bringing me into balance. Even with my ex-husband, I hold very strong boundaries, like extremely strong, and he hates it because he's used to how we used to be, and he doesn't like that I stand my ground. And I'm doing it in a place of love and not, you know, not projecting on him, but I'm doing it from a place that is speaking my truth and what's best for us. And, you know, I'm very open and you know, considerate to different things, but at some stages that, you know, it's just a no is a no, or a yes is yes, and I don't need to justify all the time, right? If it is the best thing, and yet I will explain, because I think giving people understanding is very important. I'm not going to be persecuted by someone like that. So, understanding this part of it, right? Bring my light feminine and my dark masculine into balance, because I integrated them together and bring them into both, doing both roles, right? And doing it in a healthy way. What this did then was flip me into, because when we understand that our soul seeks wholeness, our soul seeks experience through wholeness. So where we are not whole, our soul will seek, okay? Energy seeks balance. So where we are imbalanced, it will seek balance, so it will have that polarity being pulled into you. So if you are in an unhealthy quadrant or playing out in unhealthy ways, these things will be shown in your life with relationships or other external things, right? Because we energetically are trying to become whole and balanced, okay? So I flipped into my dark feminine, and she is the sensual. She's very much in a goddess energy. She's very owning her sexuality, and I didn't do that for a very long time. I hid that part of myself. And you guys have probably seen that over the last year or so, how much my sensuality and sexuality, but even then my sexuality is still very sacred. I have definitely owned the things I'm wearing and, you know, changed that part of myself because I've gone into my dark feminine. In the previous relationship, because I was in my light feminine, I attracted the dark masculine. So understanding there's like a negative and a positive, and they pull together to become whole, right? So this is normal. And also understanding in my previous relationship where I started to own my boundaries and flipping into the dark masculine, right? And or I started even sometimes in the unhealthy because it become anger and frustration, and there could be arguments. Becomes like they said, there's two energies exactly the same. Instead of pulling and a polarity and a magnetic force of coming together, we actually are hitting and bouncing apart. And that's what people do when they're fighting, because they're actually the same force of energy. It's not blending, it's not becoming whole, it's bouncing apart, right? And so understanding that that commonly happens, that when I stepped into that strong masculine and really started speaking my truth, and he was still in his masculine, we were butting heads. Yeah? So this becomes very important when we're seeing unhealthy relationships breaking out in our frame, or when we are swapping and changing things. We need to have a very open communication to explaining that, you know, and coming from a place of love, and for them, and if they're good people, they will honor that. And also to understand this too, as we swap, it adds, like when they say relationships start to, you know, I love them, but there's no spark anymore. It's because that polarity is not there. And sometimes we need to flip the polarity, and our soul is seeking wholeness. So we need them to be able to also flip to that degree too. When we've learnt to play in all four quadrants, we will learn to be able to play in our relationships so much better and add so much more spark and fierceness to this relationship. And not fierceness, not in a negative way, but just excitement, that kind of fire, right? And so, you know, if you want to add a spark to your relationship, it is then looking at these things, right? You know, so often there is, you know, the man will play a particular role in the sex, and the feminine will do the, you know, whether one's submissive and dominant or something like that. And so flipping those roles around and allowing that to you know, so the feminine to take in her dark, and the man to then stop into his lightness and be in the softness and the gentleness, right? And allow her to be in control. That is a polarity, right? And so often men have been trained through society to not be soft, to not surrender, to not be the submissive. And it doesn't mean that you're being controlled in an unhealthy way. You know, it's just learning that you can surrender into that love, that they are honoring you and pleasuring you in a different way, right? So I know this is talking a little bit of sex, but it's a way that some adults seem to will resonate to it, right? But also understanding that with our children. So for me, in my household, I'm commonly, well, I'm a bit of both. I'm that healthy, light feminine and dark masculine in my household with my children. And so that helps them be in their healthy as well. If I was really much in my light feminine, they're going to be much more in their dark masculine, and they're going to, you know, pushing on the boundaries and that space as well. So what happens when they go to their fathers is that they will then flip. If he's in his masculine, they're going to flip into their feminine, right? Children are very, very susceptible to the energy pool of these things and will surrender into it much more. But this also is a good example that commonly when a mother, like say for myself, like the kids could come home and I'd be like, oh my gosh, they remind me so much of their fathers after they've been with him. Because they've been learning his dark masculines, they've been learning his light masculine, or whatever he's playing out, whatever quadrant he's playing out, they're learning that while they're there and playing the polarity there, right? And so in his household, he'll probably be saying, they remind me so much of their mother, right? Because they're doing all these things, right? So they're polarizing, you know, with him to me, you know? So it's interesting to see this come out. And you can see how it could be somewhat confusing for children, but they actually don't see it like that. As long as me and their father are both playing in our healthy masculine feminine roles, then that's okay for them. It's just when there's someone playing unhealthy, it's going to have them flip into, you know, feeling that in the polarities, and they may even be pulled into the unhealthy polarity there too. Not always, but it can happen. And it can create more shadow and trigger, right? Okay, so this is not always the case. It's just giving you examples of how this thing works. So energy is always seeking balance. And so I've seen this in healings that I've done, where there's chakras, and little girls come in and they're like, oh, she's fierce and she's fiery and she's, you know, so like, and she's in her solar plexus is so blown out, right? And the mother was closed. She wasn't owning herself. She was, you know, and so the energy of the house in that solar plexus was being balanced out between the two. So if the mother bring her solar plexus more into balance, the daughter will be able to do the same as well, and they'll both come into balance, right? So it happens so often when we don't realize how something is lacking or out of balance within us, it's being balanced externally, right? And that's why we seek relationships, and when we meet somebody, we will see things in them and absolutely love, like, oh, you know. So in the last relationship I went to, it's interesting because I was in my dark feminine, I've attracted a light masculine male, so soft and so gentle, and he was so in his creative and so in flow, but so much so that it was, to me, some of his dark masculine wasn't that reliable type person as much, right? So I could see that, but how I had actually, and because what my body was still trying to do is create, I had not worked completely in my light masculine. So realizing I needed to work in my light masculine to create more balance within me, so that I was getting a more balanced light masculine coming in when I want to be in my dark feminine, right? Okay, so attraction comes, and whereas previously in my previous relationships, being in my light feminine, I attracted the dark masculine. And that was what all my earlier relationships were all like. Very, very much the hunting man, the strong man, the provider, you know, career focused, you know, purpose driven, that kind of thing, okay? And very much not embodied, very much in their mind, okay? Whereas the last guy was actually very creative, very, very much open to, you know, very artistic and very charismatic in his way, right? And that's because he was so much in the top chakras, right? So you can see how that can come and play, whereas I'm very intuitive as well, right? So just trying to explain how this can play out in our lives, whether it's our friends and family, and also understanding in our jobs and our roles, you know, in our role of our job, we might be very, very in our dark masculine, very focused, very driven, and all about providing stability and finances and things like that. And yet in my job, I also polarize into very much into the lights, because I need to be very intuitive and caring and appreciative, but I need to also help support, right? Which is very much more of a masculine trait, right? But feminine can be very supportive too. So, also I've seen this, I've got friends that work in this saying, you know, commonly, if I think I don't know if I did say this, but if you're working in a very, very, very masculine role, and you're so like driven and focused and worked hard, and you're like the leader or the boss, or, you know, and controlling a lot of people, and that was your job all day long, and you're really having to be strict and, you know, throw boundaries and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of the time those people seek the opposite in their sexual relationships, so they really want to be submissive. They want to have no control. They want to allow someone else to have that control. Not as in a negative way, but they just want to surrender, right? And a lot of time, if we're so heavy in one, again, we're seeking that polarity somewhere else in our lives to bring balance into us, okay? So, and I've seen this in another friend who was in a relationship that they were very, very much controlled by their female, as in the relationships, and was like dictated to and all that kind of thing. And then yet sexually he was like very, very dominant in his sexual relationship with her, you know, and they were very much kink orientated. He was, and she had to be very submissive in that. And that's what they were doing, is polarizing in different principal areas of their lives. So this happens in lots of areas. So looking back at our principal areas, looking at how we're integrating all the quadrants of the dark and light, masculine and feminine, right? So we are always born as love and pure light and wholeness, and it's through society and beliefs and things like that females are taught to be very much in the light feminine, and men are taught very much to be in the dark masculine, and, you know, the sexuality of the females looked and shunned upon, or you know, we're not allowed to be that, you know, for a long time, or if we were the slut or things like that. So seeing how society has actually molded us in a lot of ways. But for me, it was always just about being the better version of myself and finding a really better relationship, because those last ones were unhealthy, and I played my role. And it's interesting now to see, as I go into new relationships, even I've done all this work in all like my business and my personal self, because I haven't really been exploring relationships with people, like not sexual but loving relationships with another man or something. I'm seeing the old ways appearing within me, but I'm just being that conscious observer, not allowing them to play out. But it's been really interesting because they're parts of myself that haven't created new neural pathways. So these are the old ways that are appearing again. So until we master all the different areas of our lives, we're going to see some of that old stuff appear in our lives. Okay, so when you know, it's an ever evolving journey, right? Even as much as we've done the work, we now have the tools and techniques. It doesn't mean that stuff doesn't exist in other areas of our lives. And we will see that play out unless we start to change that, unless we start to work through those old thoughts and see that insecurity and see how we don't honor our boundaries as well, or things like that, right? So, yeah, it's just really being that witnesser and changing that as it comes through. So, explaining before, a lot of the time the pendulum will swing. If we're in one quadrant very heavily, the pendulum swings to the other quadrant, and it's to its polarity. And that happens quite often in, say, someone that, say, works really, really, really hard and so business oriented and go, focus, go, just overdriven. And they basically then fall down in a hump, like a heap of, can't move, right? What's happened is they've been so heavily in their dark feminine, almost overbalanced in that and unhealthy, that eventually it comes so much of a pull and a polarity that they flip straight over to the unhealthy, like, feminine. And now they're just like, I can't do anything. I can't think at the moment. I'm completely worn out. And that's the polarity, right? Like I said, when I went from my light feminine, I flipped into my dark masculine, right? And so that's the natural way that the pendulum swings, because it needs to create balance. So until we've hit that component, so for me, it was also seeing how, the pendulum swung in the men that started being attracted into my life, was the pendulum was swinging, right? Clearing out that old, and it was bringing in the new. Right? Doesn't mean they might be over the top feminine or over the top in their light and over emotional, and I wasn't used to that. I was like, oh my gosh, right? I needed a little bit of like that strong and softness, right? Not just too soft, not just too emotional, right? So that's the pendulum, and it will swing, right? So I've explained all that, so just checking I've got everything here, the light, the masculine, integrate. So as we integrate everything, so for an example, the light feminine, if she hasn't integrated her dark masculine, she might be very flaky, very aloof, very goal-driven, so in the flow, no boundaries, no diary, almost a little bit unreliable, right? Because she's so just off every day doing her own thing, and that can be unhealthy, right? So that's why we need to have that little bit of balance in there, right? And it's great to be up there, definitely owning each quadrant, but just not all in that quadrant, right? We need to, because otherwise we could be unreliable, we could be too flaky, right? Too much in the flow, and everyone's like, whether she turns up or doesn't turn up, right? Or him, right? Now it can be both, right? Because that part of the light masculine feminine can also be unreliable, right? If they haven't integrated the boundaries and goal and commitment and that space. So I have seen that in friends as well, right? Or so all right, and the dark, sexual leader, self-empowered. So a dark will be very, very very self-aware and very goal-driven and very focused and very, so you'll see that a lot in the dark attributes of the masculine and feminine. They're very self-empowered, they're very driven, they're very focused, even sexually they'll be very, doesn't mean that they're over-controlling, but they might be the leader, they might be the one that guides the way, right? And yet understanding there is components to this, and I'm going to go into this now. So the feminine is very much about receiving. She is the receiver, right? Masculine is the giver, the provider. The feminine is embodied. She's intuitive. She listens to the body. She listens to inner guidance systems, the gut feelings. You know, frogs from all the rain, right? The masculine is in the mind. They're very much about consciousness, about the thinking mind. Okay, so you can see that that's typical attributes of the the masculine and feminine. The feminine naturally will seek love, right? So that's why they're all about wanting relationships and things like that. But not realizing that we are love. So we need to come back to ourselves in love, deep love for ourselves. And yes, everyone wants connection and wants a relationship like masculine and feminine. Our soul seeks to have connection, okay? But we seek more so, again, when I was talking about earlier, it's not just connection, it's love that our soul seeks. So often we settle for okay in connection, and our soul seeks love, and that's why we need to be very aware of that. And that was, we were talking about that earlier in the needs and what is related to soul and what's just more a human need. So feminine is very flowy. She's very much of a multitasker, right? So you see women can usually do multiple things at a time, but it's a feminine attribute. So some men can do it, but it's just less common. Okay, but it's because we generally, as a female, seem to sit more often in the feminine polarities, okay, so dark or light, and the men will quite often sit more in the masculine polarities, but that doesn't always be the way. That you will see some people that are in their masculine, or like feminine are in the masculine, and masculine males that are in their feminine. Okay, so again, it doesn't have to be one for one, like males are masculine, feminine, or females are feminine. Okay, all right. So just understanding that females are much more softer. They're much more usually the caring, the nurturer. You know, that's because of that light feminine. But they're very much around love and no judgment, more forgiving and things like that. Okay. A feminine, because she's embodied and she's very much more long-winded and likes to tell a story. So in a message, you usually see, and even talking, women seem to have a lot more to say, and it's a big story. And in a message, you know, say, "Hey, how are you today?" And all of a sudden, you get everything they've done all day, right? And a man will reply with, "Yep, good day, busy," you know, or you know, you try and make arrangements, and a woman's like wants all the details, and you know, and wants to, what am I wearing, what time, and you know, is it on this corner, and you know, and all that. They'll get want a lot more, and a man will be, "Yep, see you at 5 o'clock," you know. And so it's interesting to see that, because women kind of go, "Oh, why are they short with me?" That's, men are very directed to the point. Women are flowy and bring all the components in and bring the emotion in. Men are not so much on the emotional creatures. Men are actually a lot more visual creatures. Okay, so women generally looking for emotional responses from men, but they actually are going to get more response from a man if they create a visual contact. So if we're sending a text to a man and we can create some sort of a visual play in that text, you'll get more of a response from the man than you will if you're trying to evoke emotion, because they actually feel a little bit more uncomfortable in their emotional center. Okay, and that's not always the case. So remember, it's not always the case, but it is generalized, okay, that way. Feminine, again, we've spoken about, is very intuitive. Feminine is in nature, so she's Earth, as we talked about, the Mother Earth and Father Sky, but in the world, on our Earth, we have created masculine and feminine. So the feminine is very much nature. She's untouched. She's the ocean, right? The ocean flows, and she supports boats, and you know, and it's always, you know, but the feminine is fierce too, and very emotional, and that ocean can take down that boat, right? And that's what a female's like. They're very much more an emotional creature, and they're very much fierce in those emotions, right? Whereas masculine on the world is a little bit more like the skyscrapers, New York City, right? It's that structure and that you know, very much squared off, right? So people can seek that. So quite often, a lot of, you know, men that are surfers that I've read in these books, the men that are surfers are outsourcing their feminine in nature so often, and they might be the hunters and always exploring in the forests and doing all that, are definitely much more unlikely to commit to a female. And because they're outsourcing their feminine, they're outsourcing their need for feminine, and usually they're very masculine men, So, but a female has needs as a woman, yet the ocean doesn't. It's just flow and it's complete surrender and it's just, you know. And so you can see how they can get very lost in that, right? But it's not always the case. There is some surfers that commit and do things like that. But it's just been commonly seen now that men that really outsource in the feminine in nature are less likely to source it from a female themselves, right? Or only want a little bit of connection and a bit of touch occasionally, and they're happy with that, right? They don't want a female that's all over them and that full commitment. And again, this is a little bit generalized. Females much more supportive, much more fierce in the emotion, like the ocean, right? So masculine is of service, it's the protector, it's the provider, it's very much seeks purpose and freedom. Masculine seeks freedom. Freedom is love at the end of the day, right? And to provide is love, to provide for somebody. They sometimes get that they're so worried about losing their freedom and having to over provide and lose their freedom in providing too much that they gain fear. And if we were truly in the depths of love and a woman was really in appreciation to the masculine, right, they would have the freedom to be themselves anyway, but you two would be working together, right? It wouldn't be like 50%, 250s. You'd be both 100% together supporting each other, and you would compromise sometimes to that space, yeah? So it's very common to see how men, that's a common reason men break up and leave is fear of freedom. They don't, you know, or getting with a woman like myself with children, it's a fear. Oh my gosh, she's got children, right? It's going to take my freedom away. And so it is common, but yet if for myself, right, if I'm giving complete love, I'm not going to take their freedom away. Actually, and naturally, I'm a number 5 numerology of life path, so my soul quite seeks freedom itself, right? I don't like being boxed in, yet Taurus is very structured. So I play in both polarities there very, very easily. Okay, so the masculine is also about the giving, feminine is the receiving. Masculine is directed singularity to the point. It's consciousness, it's the mind, and yeah, it's New York, right? It's the buildings. So we need to have healthy parts of both. So the dark masculine, when we go into the dark masculine, I'll give you a little bit of insight into that. So they are quick decision makers, like bang, point. Like, am I having chicken for dinner or fish? Pick it right now, you know, like, so if you're learning to try and bring these things into more polarity, you need to start getting a bit of understanding of what they are and practicing some of these things, right? They're assertive, they're directed, they're focused, they're emotionally aware, but that doesn't mean they're completely, like the conscious awareness of the emotional center, right? But, because that's embodied in the emotions are in the lower chakras. Okay, but if they're in the unhealthy, they're very dominant, they're very controlling, they don't respect other people's boundaries, they may react or act in fear and pain, and they will be overdoing to the point of depletion, right? So that's just a little bit, there's so much in there, right? There's more than that, but I just want to give insight. The dark feminine is very sensual, she's erotic, like exotic, not erotic, she's exotic, okay, she's magnetic. She is really strong in her desire, like she'll kill for love, right? She's very, very, but not unhealthy, okay? There's when you say kill for love, people could take that as an unhealthy thing, right? Okay, so again, we're bringing in the light to be healthy again. So if she's unhealthy, she's ungrounded, because the dark is in the lower chakras, so she's ungrounded. She might be getting all over the place, okay? Over-attached to the emotions, so projecting emotions, they might be emotionally manipulative, okay, and they will use sex to manipulate, or they might be over-sexual, right, and no control, right, of that sexual power. So I've seen when my sacral's been really active, when I was doing that Kundalini journey, my sacral went extremely active, and that week I was just like massively horny, excuse the words, but I was. It was just, yeah, and it was overactive, right? So those are things that can happen. You look at those lower chakras, you know, and so we could be over the top in those areas instead of being balanced in those areas, okay? So then we're going to the light feminine. Light feminine, she's more kid-like, or is more kid-like, it doesn't have to be she. magical. It's fairy tales. They're completely connected with the universe, right? In that sense that they think everything's available, which it is. We are creator beings, right? So that's all about that vision of being able to create whatever you want, however you want to create it, right? So it is their innocence, right? That's the playfulness, extremely creative. They have so much unconditional love, no judgment, right? That's the light feminine. And I see how I integrate that. I used to be very judgmental. I'm not anymore, right? I try and hold a lot of love and unconditional love to people, and I really sit in that space of really, really working hard. So that is that light feminine. But if the light feminine is unhealthy, it can be very disconnected to the world. So too often the fairies, right? Almost unrealistic in its way of approaching things. It has no boundaries, right? So it can be stepped over, taken advantage of, the doormat, right? So there's lots of attributes to the light feminine. Okay, and then the light masculine. Light masculine is actually very much stillness. So this is interesting for me because I've done so much of my meditations and my energy work is all being very embodied, right? And so I'm bringing in the energy and I'm doing movement and I'm connection and I'm flow and I'm using so much, and I'm using breath, sound and movement, right? Very embodied practices, right? The light masculine is up here. Masculine is more about mind, more about stillness. That's sitting in that quiet, very present in its presence, right? Okay, and so it's that meditation, but it's also creative. It's devotional to giving. So it's sort of like a priest. Someone's very devotional to a purpose, right? So they're very giving in that purpose is the light masculine. And so they're very aware, okay, as well. And if they're unhealthy, they lack passion, they lack purpose, they don't stand for anything, they are very disembodied. So they don't, can't connect into that. And so people that say that they have problems sitting in stillness like meditation, right? Still meditation, that's why I bring them into embodied practices to bring them into some stillness, right? Is because their light masculine is not very well integrated at the stage. And then sometimes we've got to bring in the dark feminine. And so that's going in and it is encouraging men. Go turn on some sexy, sassy music and dance erotically in front of the mirror. And that really starts to bring in that dark feminine. And a lot of guys be like, what? Dance? No way. Stand in front of the mirror and touch myself and be a bit erotic and playful. You know what I mean? But that's where we all need to integrate all of the quadrants to bring ourselves into healthy space, right? So yeah, so that was just my overview in this area, and I wanted to share because, like I said, this can help you in so many areas of your life, relationships, work, all kinds of things. So in every way that we can bring some sort of balance into these quadrants, see where we're sitting, and remember the pendulum swings, that we need to bring that pendulum in there and allow ourselves to integrate those things to bring balance in those components, and then we can use whatever it is, whether it's light feminine in certain things or the dark masculine, or go into our dark feminine and be a little bit erotic in the room, exotic, or sensual in the room, right? And bring in the light feminine, be playful and creative in that space, right? So you can see how you can start to integrate these things into your relationship. And if you see that you're seeking things or got sort of either triggered or you're really seeking something external, it's because you may not feel whole within, and you actually the soul is searching for wholeness. Soul is searching for the experience of wholeness, right? So we need to go back to that place where we can find wholeness. So by integrating all four quadrants, we become more whole, more complete, more in our heart, and we can work in all the chakras then in a balanced way. So I hope that was a lovely insight for you guys, and I will continue to share interesting new components as I come up with things that I think will be useful for you guys, because it's an ever-evolving journey. And even knowing I said it was a 6-month immersion and there'll be units for 6 months, I'm sure all of you will love the idea that I will continue to give you guys more value, more growth, more areas to continue to work through as I do too. So, love and light. Bye, babes.